Everybody's silent. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning for this session. Thank you very much. My name is Georg Schütter. I'm the CEO of the Volkswagen Foundation, and I have the pleasure to welcome you to this session, 60 years of Israeli-German science diplomacy. And the question is this a role model? In order to be a role model, one has to highlight the specifics of this type of relationship, and we will certainly do this. We do this on a day that for Germany is a day of remembrance. You heard it upstairs if you were there for the opening of today's events at 9 o'clock. It was the German Chancellor who both reminded us that today is the day to remember that the wall in Berlin fell, and at the same time, it's the day to remember the night of pogroms in November 1938. So it's a very special day to talk about 60 years of Israeli-German relations. We do this on invitation and supported by the Hertie Foundation, and there's a couple of members of the foundation. The deputy head of the advisory board is Sascha Spoon, who at the same time is president of the University of Lüneburg. Sascha, it's wonderful that you are here, and two wonderful colleagues, Ms. Proch and Ms. Perch are here as well. So thank you for making this event possible. It's wonderful that you're here. And we have a wonderful group of people to discuss the issue. Menahem Ben Sasson is here. Menahem is a historian at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Chancellor of the university, and he is professor, or was his first nomination as professor, was professor for history of the Jewish nation. Menahem was also a member of the Knesset, so somebody who has been involved in German-Israeli relations also for quite some time. Next to him is Gabriele Hermani. She is head of cooperation with European countries, especially Israel, in the German Federal Ministry of Research, Technology and Space. She is a trained political scientist, an expert on film, theater, a journalist, a publisher, and somebody who also served as science attaché at the German embassy in Tel Aviv for several years. So wonderful that you're here, Gabriele. Jenny Hestermann is a historian. She wrote a book with the title Don't Mention the War, Deutsche-Israelische Wissenschaftsbeziehungen nach dem Holocaust. And she did that focusing on the humanities and the development of the German-Israeli relations, especially in this field of scholarship in the second half of the last century. It's wonderful that you're here. And last but not least, Patrick Cramer. Patrick Cramer is president of the Max-Planck-Gesellschaft, also an award-winning life scientist and somebody who is involved and has been involved in science and research diplomacy, I would say, throughout your academic career in various capacities, but in an important one right now. So a round of applause for all our discussants here. We have about 50 minutes to discuss, and we will not do it only amongst ourselves in this wonderful circle here, but rather open up the debate to you, to your questions, to your input, to your remarks. And we will do that more or less in the last 10 to 15 minutes of this morning. So that leaves us with about 30 minutes to discuss amongst ourselves. And I would like first to ask Jenny Hestermann. Jenny, provide us with an historical picture of how the relationship started since you wrote this book, Don't Mention the War. Jenny.
Yes, thank you for the invitation to Hertie, and thank you for giving me the word. I want to make 3 points very quickly at the beginning. Since we're in the year of 60 years German-Israeli diplomatic relations, and I remember very well 2015 when we celebrated 50 years, which was a year of many more events, festivities, celebrations, and just to hint to the current debates that are ongoing that we will discuss later. And in the day, I asked myself this German rhetoric of reconciliation, friendship, building bridges, where does it really stem from? And my first point, what I found in my research is The relations in the beginning were highly pragmatic. Israelis had a deep mistrust of Germans of that generation, especially for obvious reasons. So it is a bit of a glorification of the success story in hindsight. So in the beginning, strategic interests aligned. That's my first point. Israelis were isolated. They needed funds and money, access to European knowledge and diplomacy, and Germany, West Germany, was a path to provide that. So we have this narrative by the Germans versus pragmatism of Israelis. And about science, I can say that the first cooperations were in physics, Weizmann, Rehovot, and CERN Institute, and Max-Planck-Gesellschaft. And that was, one has to read that very much as geopolitical strategic interests in the Cold War that aligned, rather than a reconciliation that stemmed from people. And in the beginning, and that's my second point, it was individuals who formed friendships or at least collegial alliances, and it gradually developed over the decades into institutional frameworks. But the process was not linear. It was always very contested and also contingent at some points. There were strains by geopolitics, especially in the 70s, when Germany took more consideration the European partners who aligned more with Arab states. So it is a success story today, to stress that, but it is not by any means was self-evident. Maybe I stop here.
Right. Well, the Max-Planck Society was mentioned, Patrick. What is the internal perception of the role of the Max-Planck Society?
Well, maybe to take on this historical perspective, it's really important to realize that 6 years before the diplomatic relationship would start, the first official German delegation, which was not an official one, which was a scientific delegation, went to Israel. There's this beautiful photo, with the Israeli plane, and the first president of Max Planck, Otto Hahn, would board the plane together with some colleagues. And just to give you one example, this was in 1959. They were actually invited by the Weizmann Institute. And this is something that we will never forget, that it was our Israeli colleagues who invited us in such a situation where people would be in Israel with the numbers from Auschwitz on their arms. And the colleagues invite us, and then they come with this delegation. And just one example, who was in that delegation? That came out only recently, that Gentner, we knew he was in the delegation, it's a physicist, but it came out only recently that he was part of, let's say, a silent resistance against the Nazis. Because the Nazis would ask them, well, the Curie family in Paris, and the son-in-law of Marie Curie, he was a nuclear physicist. He was working on nuclear fission, and he had like a cyclotron, and he had expertise. And the Nazis would tell Gentner, please go to Paris and get this knowledge. And he would say, no problem, it's a very good colleague of mine. And he would go to Paris, and the two colleagues would say, well, we will be able to delay that for a considerable time. And they did not provide the information to the Nazis. And so then after the war, somebody like Gentner, of course, was qualified to then represent Germany in Israel. I could go on forever, but this to me is almost like the hour where science diplomacy was born, the modern science diplomacy was born. Because building on that, the Minerva Foundation was founded 5 years later, and then, of course, the diplomatic relations.
Right. Well, if we put it in context, it's not only a shining picture of let's move forward. I mean, the Max Planck Society had a Secretary General at that time who did have a Nazi past. So building up a relationship was not self-evident, even for a Max Planck Society with outstanding researchers. And it was probably the researchers that could build a first basis of trust. And just like you said, very often I was Secretary General of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation that supports individual researchers. And very often you see that more structural relationships are being created based upon personal trust. And it was the head of the board of the Hertie Foundation, Annette Schavan, published an article in Der Tagesspiegel just yesterday talking about diplomacy of trust. And trust is being built by people, and so it was probably that delegation that led to trust. Menahem, what's the Israeli take on that part of history?
So, thank you for the very beginning frameworking. Let's take prehistory to the history. So the prehistory, it was done in the 50s, in the 50th anniversary, as Jenny mentioned, very colorful and a lot of investment, as Gabriele will remember. We started going back in our archives at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and we thought that we'll find out applications of Holocaust, people who faced Holocaust and wanted to come to Israel and get a university certificate to leave Germany or to leave the areas of Europe. And we indeed found some 63,000, and it's all on the internet. But what we found is the prehistory of the stories that we just heard. The professors that found haven in Israel, at that time Palestine, in the 30s, 40s, came to the university with their own files from their departments here in Germany. So they actually ran science straightforward continuity from what they had in Germany. It started in Jerusalem, moved to Tel Aviv, also when Weizmann was established to Weizmann. So it created a platform of continuity in many of the departments that still spoke German, even though the title was Hebrew University. So we want to understand the whole framework. If you went to Germany, if you had some German background, you are safe and sound in terms of continuity of research. And then comes 59 letters students sent from Berlin to Jerusalem, wanted to come even maybe before the mission came. So it's grassroots, as just described. And you said it's about people, so people were also students who initiated it, and it wasn't easy to say yes. It ended up in a positive way.
Right, and as far as I know, there was also on the side of the Weizmann Institute a wish to establish relationships again, both for scientific reason but also for support reason. The institute was a couple of years old, and in the late 1950s, the Weizmann Institute does have a reputation to reach out. Even until today, we have friends of Weizmann Institutes all over the world, but they established that type of outreach already in the 1950s as well, right?
Yes, and at the beginning, we used the same bank account, the Hebrew University in Weizmann, because Weizmann was the one who opened or initiated Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Small country, few institutes, I think sort of quality, and that's the secret of the success.
Well, please, Jenny, go ahead.
I would just love shortly to add to the story of the Hebrew University that while it was heavily German in the 30s, in the 50s also the German language was forbidden/frowned upon. So it was actually very difficult to continue engaging with German history, language, culture, and for Israelis to travel to Germany because the presidencies, the rectorate, didn't want to allow it. So there's also this friction that plays into that history.
Well, since your knowledge is there, help us to move fast forward to the new century here. You said there were ups and downs. In the 1970s, it became complicated because Germany established relationships to Arab countries. What happened afterwards? We had the fall of the wall, a new relationship with a unified Germany.
Yes. So in the beginning, late 50s, when the science diplomacy started, early 60s, when youth exchange, etc., started, and then diplomatic relations, it was framed as a special relationship. And the SPD government in '69 changed that and started talking about normalization. So after the '67 war, there was a lot of criticism on Israel and the occupation, and European partners were more aligned with Arab countries, and then there was always a balance that German government had to walk between keeping the special relationship and also aligning within the European community that grew stronger and stronger. I would say that's a challenge that has been overcome if we really want to fast forward. So Germany, as we know, managed to keep the special relationship. And it was only in the 80s, though, that more institutions were formed, like the GIF,
the German-Israeli Foundation.
Like the German-Israeli Foundation. And then in the 90s, it really kicked more off with also research institutes in Germany that researched more Jewish than Israeli history, though. One point Germany has heavily invested in research centers in Israel to teach about German history, language, culture from the DAD and Minerva, while as young Germans did not learn so much about Israel than the other way around. So there is an asymmetry that we also see that I would like to point out, because we're still in that situation today that in schools and universities we don't learn enough about Israeli history, the complexities of the prehistory, the Zionist project, the conflict, etc.
Well, thank you very much. Somebody who has to deal with the present, so I'm grateful for that. Fast forward is Gabriele Hermani, who now works in a federal ministry and tries to build relationships. And as far as I understand, Gabriele, these relationships are built upon those institutions which were created in the 1980s, 1990s. Amongst others, the Volkswagen Foundation has established an exchange program 45 years ago. So there is a number of institutions that you count on, right?
This is true, and I can't agree more that we need here more studies you talked about. But let me say the governmental relations were also very important, and they framed all these institutions which were built. So in this year, in March, we celebrated 60 years of science relations with Israel, and when we look back, it is a huge success. It is not only that we work together in all fields, but especially in the very important fields. Let me name, for example, batteries research, water technology, cancer research, next year 50 years with Heidelberg. And we have the foundations. You mentioned the GIF, very important for young scientists. And of course, we have Martin Buber Foundation at the Hebrew University. Thank you, Menahem, for all the support, which focus on young scientists and humanities, of course. And we have at our side Minerva, and thanks to MPG, we can look back on like 50 years of successful collaboration. We have the DFG program, and we have lots of calls between the two countries, which we did together. And the scientific relations on the governmental side were always fruitful, I have to say. And
Okay.
we look into the future, and we signed at that event in March a memorandum of understanding with the ambassador and the then Minister Özdemir, which also count on the new development in the world. So we also prepared for this.
Okay. Patrick, if we look at the drivers of collaboration today from a scientific point of view, and Minerva, the Minerva Foundation was mentioned, where do you see the scientific driver, joint fields of curiosity, where a common future is being developed?
Actually, there's many. I mean, some were mentioned. The natural sciences, of course, are in the focus. Don't forget that Tel Aviv is an ecosystem for innovation. They have these small companies. They are in AI. They are in internet-based businesses. They are in technology. So it's an amazing, ecosystem, not just for high-level science, but also for innovation. We can learn a lot from Israel. And, on top of the natural things that we do, of course, with the 6 universities and Weizmann, which is biotechnology, which is physics, which is chemistry and so forth, don't forget things like law. So I have to run out here at 11 sharp because I take a plane to Israel.
All right.
And so on Monday we will be at Weizmann, because you all know there was a missile hitting from an Iranian one, and there's $500 million damage. So we will look at that and see what we can do also to help. But on Tuesday, we go to Hebrew University and we open the first Max-Planck Center in Israel. And what do? These are actually legal scholars who cooperate to analyze democracies, the resilience of democracies, but who also look into the future. You know, how could a constitution for Israel look like in this special context with the many different religious groups and the special history? So don't forget, you know, these fields, the humanities, law, the social sciences. Here's also, we have great opportunities for collaboration.
Menahem, you said when we entered the room that the focus of the relationship has also shifted to valorization of research results. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yes, it's not a surprise. The framework and the basis at the beginning was economic. Germany gave billions out of the damage, then estimated to be 300 billion during the Holocaust, and at the end, maybe we ended up in getting 100 and something billion, the value of. But the story around started as economic one, and soon, nowadays it's even accelerated. We still want to add to the gap between the economics, the import and the export. But Israel nowadays exports to Germany services and know-how. And the theme of this conference now is high-tech. I heard that Germany is going to invest 18 billion. Part of it, I'm quite sure, is going to be taken from Israeli know-how and experience. How is it going? Go to Ben Gurion, young university. There, your company, the telecom company, invested 18 million at the beginning. Nowadays, it's much more. Israel doesn't have even one car factory. Germany has a lot. However, when it comes to helping off car industry, we have 457 different companies of know-how. Autonomous cars, this kind of. So this is kind of a relation that was developed. I'm not in the commerce. I'm in academics, because the beginning of the autonomous car and the beginning of any of other development is not in the commercial part. It starts with basic science. So the contact is based on the academic institutions that developed the know-how, and later on it become industry. So in many ways, they go hand in hand. And nowadays, what we have is a result and a promising that if 18 billion are invested here, I think that at least out of the 18, 26 billion will come to us, hopefully.
Here we go. To that extent, we have a role model. If I summarize it just briefly in a nutshell, it was people who established contacts. Then we had institutions. Now we have a number of drivers of collaboration, be it research curiosity, be it value creation, be it joint businesses. And to that extent, we talk about a role model. Let's talk about the hurdles of collaboration. And there are a number of hurdles. If we look at the European context, there was a huge debate within the Union whether Israel should be an affiliated country to the framework program. And there are international there's an international movement to stop relationship. Jenny, you wanted to say a few words about that to start that part of our debate.
Yes. 2 points. I think you mentioned yesterday, or maybe somebody else, the discrepancy between science and society that we really have to be careful about. And in one way, I see it also in the German-Israeli relations. So heads of universities, presidents of foundations that are here in this room are working very strongly on those relations. But I feel like the faculties and students and the society in large is on a very different level concerning these relations and not so friendly. And speaking about your point, there's a very worrying movement in Europe in the last 2 years. As you know, Israeli scholars are getting disinvited. Not only institutions are boycotted, but also individuals, also those who are very outspoken against the government. So it's not about that. It's like pure anti-Israeli. And I'm very happy to say that in Germany we are still standing strong, but I don't see this development in countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, UK, Scandinavia stopping because the war ended. It's a wave that it's also coming from that is very like strengthened out of the post-colonial studies movement the last 5 to 10 years in Europe. And while 10 years ago it was very also for me normal to speak about, I work on Israeli history, it's become a very contested topic to the point that you can't even say the name Israel in certain contexts anymore, and in a lot of humanities and social sciences faculties. So I applaud the collaboration in tech and AI and natural sciences, but as a historian, I'm very worried about our fields and how it will play out in the European context.
I would like to ask Patrick first, because you mentioned the breadth of collaboration from the hard sciences all the way to the humanities, scholars of law enter. Do you feel within the Max-Planck Society this type of movement? Is there some resentment against your colleagues to collaborate?
Well, you know, I've been in office for 2.5 years, and I would say this topic was the one that cost me most energy and time. I was happy to put that in because I know it's very important, but it was such an amount of work to prevent a situation that we saw in Columbia or Harvard, because these are the people Max Planck compares itself to. And we were able, and actually I think many of us should be proud, we were able to prevent these cultural wars. And this is not self-evident. 41% of our directors do not have a German passport. They have a very different view of Israel. Almost 60% of our junior researchers do not have a German passport, so the majority is international. And you just have to look to the Netherlands, where the universities are boycotting Israel. We have an institute in the Netherlands, so I just received a letter on that. So what I want to say, because this is so much, I could fill hours on that. What I want to say is that we managed, by discussing intensely, by having a very clear line that we follow, to differentiate between criticism of the government, which is allowed and which we always did. Within Israel, we criticize Netanyahu. And our colleagues who are our partners, friends, and scientists, and who are the civil society that we want to strengthen. And you know, by always explaining that, we managed to keep a majority, and we prevented these cultural wars. So far, so good. And that is what I would like to do in the future.
Is it also a generational issue? Max Planck simply does not have students?
Well, I mean, people come to us at the age of 23, 24 to do their PhD. Some come for the master. We have master courses at Göttingen, for example. So we do have a lot of international young people, and we do get a lot of criticism, and we need to explain. And of course, we could use the historical explanation, but I don't think it's very strong. It's strong for us, it makes sense, but not for somebody who comes from Bangladesh at the age of 24 to Max Planck. We have to make clear that they have to differentiate between a government that you can criticize, and you should criticize, and our colleagues who are part of the civil society and our partners, and who are actually even organizing the resistance against the government. So, you know, I've been in Israel 3 times just to give speeches at Bar Ilan, at Technion, to give speeches and say, in Israel, this is a great concern. This war has to stop. The government must reconsider. It's very easy to send a post anonymous on the net, but it's very difficult to go to Haifa, to go to Tel Aviv, and to criticize the government of Israel for what they do in Gaza. Still, I get a lot of criticism. You are pro-Israel, because people don't differentiate. No, I'm pro-science. And science is what is evidence-based, what is fact-based, is the rationality that we need to bring into such a region of conflict. So how can you boycott the force that brings rationality to the table in that region of crisis? It's totally counterintuitive.
Menahem, you've been building bridges between Germany and Israel throughout decades. You spent every winter, if I'm not mistaken, here in Berlin. But throughout the past 2 years, I've received numerous emails from you thinking about, complaining about the boycott that takes place all over Europe. What did you do, and what's your experience throughout those past 2 years to deal with that situation?
So since it's only you and I here, we can talk about what I ask for. I approach individuals who are at the head of the German academic community, head of institutes, head of foundations like Volkswagen, and I ask for their help. It never happened before. I'm old enough to give you a perspective of almost 40 years. I drafted the Israeli constitution when I was in the Knesset, and I spent time here in the Bundestag and with the late President Herzog of yours to draft the Israeli constitution. At that time, who would dream that a scientist would ask for your help against boycotting? Nowadays, in order to approach some of the places in the world, we need you. We need you because you are not us. You are not suspected to be us. Yes, Patrick is suspected to be pro. You are suspected to be pro, but at the end, everybody knows that you speak the only language that should be taken seriously, the language of science. Hertie speaks the same language in each schools. Therefore, we approach you. We ask you for help. We know that you are the bridge to other places to bring them back without any justification to what they were used to do, namely to be in charge of science. University X in Belgium, University Y in the Netherlands, University Z in Spain, all nowadays surrendering to the voice that you hinted to. It is not necessarily the voice of science. If you want to develop science, it's exactly what I ask you. I have been asking you for the last 2 years. Help us reaching out to institutes here and abroad to convince them to continue with what we know what to do. And one more sentence. There is no future to the region. Forget about nowadays stories. There is no future for the region without the scientists. You need the educators, you need the professors of law, you need the professors in high-tech different branches. They are the ones who bring healing. Otherwise, we are doomed to be third world. So that's also the future.
If we use the metaphor of languages, Gabriele, just a second, there must be a missing link in translation, because the language of science should be universal, and yet there are academic institutions that either divert from using the language, or there is a missing link in translation, so they don't understand the value. Gabriele.
I would like to add a practical example how governmental help could or how governments could help. I was also in Poland for 4 years, and the situation there with anti-Semitism is, well, also not that nice. And we worked together, the German embassy with the Israeli embassy, and we did a hackathon at a huge museum in Warsaw. And the hackathon theme was how to fight together against anti-Semitism. So scientists from all over, more or less, Poland, US, Germany, and also young entrepreneurs came to Poland, to Warsaw, into this museum, were stuck there for 2 days and had to figure out what technical solutions do we have to fight anti-Semitism in our country. And they came up with wonderful solutions, and I hope some of them were followed, but this is something which German embassies and Israeli embassies can do all over Europe. And it costs not that much money. It's something we can afford, yeah.
Again, where's the missing link in translating the language of science into a language that is understood on a broader basis? Jennifer, do you have any take?
How can science be translated to society? I think
now the value of science to build bridges between Israel and other countries.
Well, first, I think it's always an illusion that we can do pure science that is somehow not connected to society. So it was never neutral. It's also not neutral in the present. This question was discussed also yesterday, and I have no good answer. How value can be translated to society. I think I want to reiterate on your point, now I'm sure it was yours, we shouldn't be activists. So I think that's also very important, especially in my field, that people who are from very different fields, economists, political scientists maybe, speak about Israel and the conflict and the Middle East as if they are experts, and it gets convoluted with private opinions that they might have, but because they speak as scientists, people assume they have expertise. So I think this German-Israeli case, or the case of Israel in the world right now, is actually a crystallization point for many problems we have overall with the distinction between opinions and facts, and the distinction between activists, scholars, and how science and society are intertwined and how they are not. I didn't really answer your question, but I think your point was important to explain, to like really insist on making the difference between a scientific community and the world of academia and a government that may be criticized. But it's a whole fight against anti-Semitism, so I have no good answer.
But your answer helps me to relate to our motto, a role model. So the current situation seems to be a role model for a broader set of challenges that we have in the research community. Before I turn to Patrick, let me remind you that time has come for your questions and your remarks. But Patrick, you wanted to intervene first.
You know, looking into the future, when there was the escalation between Israel, US, and Iran, I called the Iranian directors that we have, right? And wanted to hear your opinion. And just to tell you about the complexity, they were at the time concerned about some points that were made by German politicians. Yeah, let them do the tough work. Remember this?
I remember that, yes.
So how complex that is. So they didn't have a problem with Israel. They had a problem with how they were seen as Iranian, like top-level researchers in Germany. So this tells you about the complexity. Now think about Lebanon, think about Egypt, think about Jordan, think about Saudi Arabia. So what can we do? And that's the point I want to make for the future. Because we see all these people, and we have all these wonderful people within Max Planck, and they are pipetting next to each other, and they're not fighting, and they shake their heads. What are they doing back home? You know, fighting all the time. So we have this great opportunity that science is almost like a peace organization where people get together and speak a common language. And so what can we do for the region? I will actually travel to the Middle East and now visit a lot of the countries around Israel. Because remember, 3 years back, Israel would collaborate with Saudi Arabia, the Emirates. There were new treaties and they were exchanging knowledge, actually addressing global challenges, addressing green hydrogen, addressing clean water and so forth and so forth. So we want to connect back to that time. And I think this sounds crazy to some people, but maybe you would agree with that. I think Israel can almost be like a gateway to the region because there is partnerships and we can revive them to expand science, for example, to the Emirates and other places where actually there's a lot of money now for science and where we should also have partnerships. And that is a great possibility we have in Europe, that we can have these multilateral collaborations because we were interested in good science. And then, last sentence, could use it also for science diplomacy, just, without having this intention, but just because we work with all these people.
Right. It seems as if the hard power politics lead to new openings like the Abraham Accord. Would science be able to even go beyond that? Think about Iran. This seems to be a hurdle that cannot be overcome by regular
I was
politics.
Georg, I was just in Latin America, which is totally shifting. Argentina used to be a prime partner. Now Milei is taking the money out of science. Now Brazil comes back with Lula, and there's a big, new money, and we will collaborate with San Diego. We will We were there actually prior to the climate conference to educate also local politicians. So the world is changing all the time, and because we are just interested in the best science, I think we can do that diplomacy. And we should not be afraid of any borders. We should think freely.
Thank you. First, I would like to ask you, Walter Rosenthal, you're the first one, and there is a question. Oh gosh, there's a question over there. So we move from Walter to this side, or from this side, and then to Walter, and then to you, and then to you. Okay, you go first. Introduce yourself just briefly.
So I'm John Bagger. I'm with the American Physical Society, a professional organization that has members in 100 countries. First, about Iran, I just wanted to say that Germany has played a big role in nucleating the Sesame light source in the Middle East, which is bringing together partners that don't speak to each other normally: Israel, Iran, Jordan, Egypt, Palestine. So again, big congratulations.
Brief interruption. If there is anybody who has money for Sesame, they're searching for money.
Exactly. Sesame
Bring
is
it over there.
They're always searching
Apologies.
for money, but it's a yes. And the other thing I just wanted to say that I think it's super important to separate governments from science in this, as you were saying. The American Physical Society stands against all boycotts, and frankly, these days, as an American, I really appreciate that myself.
Thank you very much for that statement. So I would like to turn to Walter and then to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Walter Rosenthal. I'm president of the German Rectors Conference with 270 universities, comprising all the public ones and a couple of other ones. So in a way, I would like to speak for the German universities and just mention that we have hundreds of collaborations with colleagues in Israel. There are very tight links, and all the Near East conflicts had as a consequence that we have even more collaborations. And I was several times in Israel, and I think we have a really good exchange. But I see that we do have problems. We have the students, which Max-Planck does not have, the undergraduates. So we have a lot of students from the Near East, and we have loud voices that protest against Israel. You all witnessed the demonstrations and the anti-Semitism in the last 2 years or so. But still, I would like to maintain that this is really a minority among the students and also among the teaching staff, the faculty. And I don't know of any single university leadership that supports the boycott. Just the opposite. We are very clear in the HIK that boycott is the wrong way to go, despite all the justified criticism towards the Netanyahu government and what it has been doing so far. So I think we do have to differentiate it, and for me a very important difference between Germany and Israel is that the science is much more powerful in Israel because you are a high-tech state, as you pointed out, and so you have a lot of influence, much more political influence than we probably have as a scientific community in Germany. The European boycott is a big problem. We have at least 50 boycotting institutions. Also, your rectors' conferences support the boycott. The countries were named already. But we have, I think, a constructive debate also in the European University Association. So I think that we are I have a constructive debate that will probably lead to different points of view also among members of the European University Association. One very last point.
Thank you very much, Walter.
One last point is that from the river to the sea, students were asked, what's the river, what's the sea? More than half didn't know the answer. So I really support what you say.
Spree in the Baltic.
Yes. So I think
Thank you very much, Walter.
We have
Walter,
more information on the history of
why
Israel.
don't you pass on the microphone over there? Thank you very much for your statement. But Jenny wanted to intervene just briefly.
Just very briefly. I did not mean to question the university leadership of Germany. I am happy you brought up that point. But then to the question of Menahem, how can you help the Israelis and the rest of the European countries? That is, I think, the question, not that Germany stands strong in the level of leadership.
Right. Thank you. It's your turn.
Katrin J. Yuan from the Swiss Future Institute. very delightful and deep conversation. I liked especially your point. I'm not pro one country, I am pro science. And I especially like Gabrielle's point with her hackathon. I'm personally deeply impressed by the Falling Walls Science Summit. Involve the youth. We have proven that with 100 science pitches, winners from all over the world. Yes, involve technology, science, and the youth with hackathon as one of many examples. And I would even go one step further. What about we start with the very, very youngest of us, with the kids? It will deeply resonate with the deep values before they grow to adults and build their opinions forever. Yeah, and let's challenge that and use this sleeping potential and breaking down the walls, pulling up the bridges for good. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I heard the kids in my back, but they left. Sorry for that. We do have a voice from Athens.
Okay, this is the voice from Athens. I'm Christina Koulouri. I'm the rector of Pantheon University of Social and Political Sciences, and I'm a historian. So I very much appreciate what you said, because I have two questions, actually. I very much agree that Israel and Germany is a role model for reconciliation for the whole world. This was something that we couldn't imagine that it would happen. So, but reconciliation cannot only based on rationality, and it cannot only based on science diplomacy. So my question is, what about education? Have you managed to develop a common narrative of your history? How do you come to terms with the trauma on both sides? So did you change the textbooks? Did you change the curricula? And the second question is this Israeli-German reconciliation a role model also for the reconciliation between Israelis and Palestinians? Thank you.
All right. So what I do now is I collect questions, and I would like to ask everybody now, use 20 seconds. If we do that, most of you will have a chance to ask the question, and then it's our challenge to deal with it. So we've got two. We will get a new one over here.
Well, as there are asked now, there's a place for asking questions only. Now, I don't want to introduce myself, so no self-marketing. All right, so if I look for the title here, 60 Years of Israeli-German Science Diplomacy and Falling Walls. What do we have to remember? Falling walls means actually as well the eastern part of Germany.
Yeah.
So what
you got 20 seconds for a question.
What was actually the German science diplomacy, Israel-German science diplomacy from the East German part of Europe?
Okay.
Is there some tradition of anti-Semitic parts of the socialist ideology from the former National Socialist to the later realistic socialist part?
Important question. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Because it's missed completely.
We've got a question over there.
Yeah, Ulrike Feld, I'm a social scientist, University of Vienna. I would like to broaden the question a bit, and I would also like to plead that we see science as entangled with society. And I want to ask the question, are we okay? CERN was a model, the European High Energy Physics Lab was a model to integrate after the war France and Germany, and the design was made in order to be able to integrate
So we've got the question CERN.
Now comes
Thank
the question.
You.
CERN has not prolonged the collaboration agreement with Russia. So where do we draw the line that we allow that science interferes with politics, and where do we say science should not interfere with politics?
Thank you. We've got two more questions, one here and one there, and that's it.
Hi. As a young Israeli investigator, I was at Boston for the past 3 years. I'm going to open my own lab at the Weizmann Institute. I just got yesterday a candidate from a Palestinian student who wants to come to the lab. So there is dialogue, and it's within science. But in Boston and even in Europe, I wasn't able to actually have a dialogue with the demonstrators, even though I tried many, many times to form that type of dialogue. And for me, I feel like the history is being rewritten as we speak and might change how the future would look. So I'm asking, how do you change that? Maybe it's a minority, it's very loud. I have been receiving emails that nobody will collaborate with me because I'm going to be in an Israeli institute. So how do you fight that? How do you suggest to do dialogue and fight misinformation, disinformation, and actually build the bridge with those loud voices that are being
Thank you very much. And one last intervention here. I would like to ask you, don't turn off the mics sharp. We will let Patrick reach his airplane, but we run over time for about 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nadav Douani. I'm the CEO of Science Abroad organization that represent 12,500 Israelis, PhDs, and physicians around the globe. One statement, please. It's not a question. You're talking about anti-Semitism. You're talking about boycott. Please remember one thing. This is a Jew hatred. No more than that. When Israelis, when Jews afraid to walk at the academia, speaking Hebrew, taking their kippah out of their head, it's because they're afraid they're not safe in the center, in the area of the universities. Germany, our best friend at the European Union, nearby the Czech Republic, need to lead this fight that will make Jews safe at the universities, safe at the streets, because as my friends here, Shai spoke, stayed in Boston, we are afraid,
20 seconds,
we are afraid to walk and speak Hebrew, we are afraid to recognize ourselves as Jews, and the history, unfortunately, is rising and coming again. Sorry for that.
Thank you. Now, we have 0 seconds left. Menahem, maybe you answer on the last 2 questions. Anti-Semitism being prevalent in many places, how is dialogue possible? How can Israeli scholars do what they want to do?
One dialogue is possible. It is running in our universities as a role model, and we can implement it here with the help of the establishment. We try to be in touch in order to show some of the examples of the laboratories of mutual relations that we developed.
Thank you very much. Patrick, Russia, CERN, Israel.
So the Russia thing always comes up, and it's just an in-allowed comparison for many reasons, not just who attacked whom and so forth, but it's very simple. When the European Union says we don't transfer money to Russia, then the Max-Planck Society cannot transfer money to Russia. It's as simple as that. I always encourage our individual researchers, please continue to talk to your Russian colleagues. You cannot transfer money, but the Constitution protects us, and politicians will come back to us and say, oh, now Putin is gone, now the conflict is over. Do you still have contacts to Russia? So please keep those contacts. Also, we are not allowed to transfer money at the time.
Okay, toughest question. German culture of remembrance, textbooks, reconciliation as a role model. Jenny, would you be able to engage in a bilateral dialogue, because we cannot solve that in 10 seconds?
Oh, okay, sure.
Would that be okay?
I just prepared 20 seconds, but I can...
20 seconds now,
20 seconds.
and 10 seconds on East Germany. You go.
No, on her. What we learn in school is a lot. We learn about the Holocaust, history of anti-Semitism. We do not learn about modern Israel. So I really would like Herrn Rosenthal to do something about that. Question, can it be a role model for Israel-Palestinians? I don't think so. The World War II ended, Holocaust ended, Israel-Palestine have an ongoing conflict. Palestinians are often have constraints by their own society to collaborate with Israelis. So also to mention that. And so not one can draw comparisons, but yeah.
And does your book also reflect upon the East German part of the relationship?
I admit I have a very blind spot concerning East Germany. I'm very sorry. I only deal with West Germany.
All right. So we are not going to solve this. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Thank you for the rush throughout the last questions. A hand of applause for the panelists here.
Thank you. And